Safari. I'm Stef and on camera today with me is Bryan. And what you were just looking at over there was for me the turning point where winter is finished. It's for me the sort of absolute mark of when winter is finished and we can start expecting warmer weather and wetter weather from now on forward. What you're looking at was a knobthorn's flower, and the most amazing flowers. The tree basically covers itself in flowers that look like dead sticks, and then almost overnight these dead sticks erupt in this fluffy yellow, whitish yellow flower. And there are actually some on this tree I want to show you. And just go in over there. There we go. There you can see the first ones of the flowers. We can expect this overnight. It's going to be covered in these fluffy white flowers. Birds and insects all over the place are now just going to start going up. And for me, this is the turning point, really. From here, we're going to be seeing a bunch of different flowering trees start pushing out their buds. Weeping boer beans, shambok pods, tree wisterias. All of these fantastic flowers are going to start coming up. I did my selection camp for guarding between the 18th and the 28th of August in 1998. Can you believe it? All those years ago. And this was the very first tree that I learned, and it was because it was the only tree that was flowering at that time where I was, which wasn't too far away from knobthorn tree. How it survived not being ring-barked by elephant is testimony to, I don't know what, to the luck of where this tree germinated. A real massive example of a knobthorn tree. There's very few knobthorns of this size left. Elephants are wonderfully fond of its bark, which they peel off in great slabs during the winter. Have a look where it germinated. It germinated right on the edge of this drainage line over here, and I think that's exactly why elephants haven't managed to ring bark it yet. It's because they battle to get to it. It's only really accessible from one side in the course of this tree's life. Wonderful. And on that note, I think we can carry on with our afternoon drive. I haven't really got a plan today. I have planned to check the dams. It's always a good idea for me to do that. I love checking dams in the afternoon and see what the movement has been around the water. Next, we're going to be seeing these drainage lines that crisscross through Djuma, and we'll see what that leads us to. I haven't really got a plan as we're going to follow this or we're going to follow that. We haven't heard anything more about the Birmingham boys, just for those of you who were listening to this morning. The last news that I had was that they were just south of our traverse. They had split the Matimbas. The Matimbas were not together. They were split across the reserve, and they were going mental, for lack of a better word. They were sniffing up and down. Their manes were bristling. That was the last that I heard. It's been a hot day. The temperature today is about 29. It was right now about 26 degrees centigrade, which is just below 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Not quite as warm as yesterday, but it definitely still is hot, as you no doubt see from the very shiny, I have no doubt, very shiny appearance of my bald head. So it is quite warm. But on that note, the best way to cool down a baking head is to drive. So let's do that. Wow, that was nice to see. The first knobthorn flowering. I'm sure that once I start looking, I'll actually find more. But they haven't been that apparent. And you'll see over the next 2 or 3 days, and literally 2 or 3 days, how quickly the bush starts changing. It goes from this very drab landscape. We'll start seeing almost on a everyday basis some trees that start to flower. And Curious One has just sent through a question. Good afternoon, Curious One. You've said, yay, summer's back, or spring's back at least. The ibis are back. You haven't seen them in weeks. I'd love you to qualify that statement for me, if you don't mind, curious one. What ibis are back? Where did you see them? And when was the last time you saw them? I'd love to know the answer to that question. That tree's now got me looking at every knobthorn, just in case it was I've made a mistake. But I can't see one knobthorn, even in the same drainage line, that even has flowers on it just yet. So I think that was the first one. Nyala here that's lying in the shade. Oh, she's going to move off. Part of the Tragelaphus antelope, or the spiral-horned antelope, which include kudu and bushbuck in this particular area. Kudu, bushbuck and Nyala, they're all part of the Tragelaphines. And they all have very similar, here she goes up the embankment, very similar body shapes, very similar diets, and they've all got those very cryptic markings on their coats with the stripes, the lighter coloured stripes. See if we can find some more in a bit. Here we go. See those stripes that they've got on them, that rusty coloured coat. It's actually at these antelope where you get the differentiator between ram and ewe and bull and cow. You call them a Nyala ewe and a Nyala bull instead of the other way around. Everything bigger than this is a bull and a cow. Everything smaller than this is a ram and a ewe. Got a few males in this particular group, youngsters. They haven't got that very dark coat and those quite impressive horns that they carry around. Browsers. Now picking up fallen leaves on the floor and seed pods. Seeds, of course, containing a lot of oil, and in that fatty oil is energy. There's a big female. One coming into your screen from the left, that's about as big a female Nyala gets. Quite impressive jumpers. It's a youngster. Lots of Nyala in this part of the Sabi Sands. In the south part of the Sabi Sands, I hardly saw any. I think in 10 years of guiding in the southern part of the Sabi Sands, if I saw Nyala 5 or... Alrighty. So the Nyala have managed to all walk away and melt into the bush, as they say. Time for us to carry on. We're going to go and have a look at Treehouse Pan. Can see from the bush around us, it's just incredibly dry, and the grass, what little grass is left, stand just lying flat. They've all been knocked down, broken off at the stalk, and that's because grass pulls all its energy into the rhizome, into the root part of it, to be used when they grow in the next year. So here, after walking straight through Djuma last night, I'm going to see if I can show you one or two of their tracks. It's amazing how they keep on using this road. There's that one there, right? See if I can show you their track there. Let me give you an idea of how big that is. Let me go put my hand next to it. I haven't got the world's biggest hands. But I'll give you an idea. That thing's paw is about the same size as my hand. And this is the... Let me do it like this. Here we got a comparison for you. It's a Stef print versus a big male lion print. Left paw to left paw. Just having some fun this afternoon. But what it does do is raise the topic of how different fresh tracks look from slightly older tracks, and you can absolutely see how crisp that track is versus the lion track next to it. You can almost see that the wind and time has had an effect on that track. My track is down. Sorry. There we go. My track is fuzzed. And you can also see that the track is slightly more compressed and shiny, my track. We call it shining. Trackers call it shining. When a track is very fresh, it shines. And that's what it means to shine. You can see it out there quite nicely. Thanks, Bryan. Sorry. And now back to our grasses again. Debbie in Vancouver has made the observation that their grasses are very dry, and what are the grazers eating? Debbie, they will survive on it's very similar to hay. Very like farmers would cut grass and store it for their cows and their sheep during winter. The grass does hold some nutritional value, not as much as it does when it's green, but it does hold some nutritional value. And a lot of the grazers will actually eat the rhizome of the grass as well. Anything that's above the ground, they'll eat. In particular, impala. And impala are very good at terraforming. Impala and elephant at transforming their environment to suit their needs. Elephant keeping plants coppiced and open, and impala keeping open areas going, which is what they like to do. They like to hang around in open areas. It's safer for them to do so. Warthog will also eat the rhizomes, are very good at eating rhizomes, as are rabbits, or hares in this particular area, no rabbits. Signal might be a bit choppy in this particular area. Asked to elaborate on what the word tragelaphus means, and that's quite a good question. I only know it to mean spiral horned antelope, so I only know it as spiral horned antelope. And for those of you with access to some information resources, you're welcome to please send your answers. Can either be sent through to the Twitter handle #SafariLive, or you can email questions at wildearth.tv, and I'll share it with everybody else. So tragelaphus, or the spiral horned antelope, is about as far as my knowledge goes on that one. I would be very keen to know what the rest of, or where that word comes from. Bumped into some elephant. And then we've got some feedback coming through from Matt in Texas, trying to describe what ibis we were talking about a bit earlier. And Matt says that he heard the hardy-dar ibis. Matt, the hardy-dar ibis does not migrate. It's a sedentary bird. But it's nice to know that you heard them. You know, in cities like Pretoria and Cape Town and Natal, the hardy-dar ibis is almost a pest. Out here, it's such a pleasure to see those birds and listen to their calls, almost like it's a reminder of home. This young elephant standing in the shade of this knobthorn. Can you believe it? While I'm busy sitting here watching this elephant, I noticed a vehicle, and in that vehicle I see Andrew's bearded face, and Jamie is actually in this elephant herd as well that I didn't even know. What's nice, we don't do it too often, is we'll be able to see this elephant herd from two different angles. It gives us a nice opportunity for that. So there's Andrew and Jamie, and we're going to be going through to them. See you in a bit, I suppose.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Sunset Safari. And I am the person that you were looking at with Stef. Apparently, we both managed to find the same herd of elephants in the same place. Very, very interesting moment. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Jamie, and I have Andrew on board with me, who I believe was just waving at you a moment ago. And we've also, funnily enough, got a herd of ellies here. I have yet to meet the famous Mr. Wrinkly Bottom elephant calf that I've heard so much about. I'm quite hoping this herd might contain him somewhere in here. And Stef and I approached from completely different angles, so we ended up in pretty much the same place. I was following one elephant, he was driving a different road, and we met sort of somewhat in the middle. But always a wonderful time to spend some time, quality time, with the elephants out here. We've got a little 3-year-old there, walking across in front of us. Really big female at the back there. There's a couple of very big females in this herd. We're right in the middle of them at the moment, so I'm just going to sit and wait for them to feel comfortable to come past us, especially because there are so many. The little male on the left is the one that we saw and originally followed. Hello, little baby. Good afternoon. Elephants at this age are so wonderful. They're very, very curious little creatures. This is a little female. Just giving us a friendly reminder of that fact. And typically this is the way that elephant herds will move, with the matriarch or one of the higher ranking females in front, and then 1 or 2 of the larger females at the back as well. I'm going to reposition in a moment. There is quite a weeny baby with them, so I'd like to be able to get a nice look at the little one. Arrived at the sighting, or just before, I think they could well have been sleeping. because I sat and listened for quite a long time, waiting to see if they would emerge after I saw the first one, and there was absolute silence. So I think they've only just started their afternoon movements. This female is just enjoying the first new leaves of the knobthorn growth. I know that Stef found some of the first knobthorn flowers starting to appear. And very soon these knobthorns will be very, very heavily targeted by the ellies. They're one of the first deciduous trees that start to get those nice fresh green leaves back. Impressive set of tusks. They're fairly thin but quite long. Typically, with almost all elephants, you'll see a marked difference in the length of the tusks, and that's because they are either left or right-handed, to put it in a way that we understand. In this case, she appears to be right-handed. The right tusk is a little bit more worn down than the left one. And this is a great situation for Project Packy Poop. There's lots and lots of babies at different ages. So I'll be watching to see if we can collect any samples and do a little bit of pachyderm poo aging. I'm just going to in on the radio that we've got some ellies. Well, I think Stef has just done that for me, since we both ended up at the same sighting. And they've set off further into the block, and probably led by the matriarch of the group. And Lindsay, good afternoon, welcome to the Sunset Safari. You were wondering if the matriarch is always the oldest, and yes, typically she will be the oldest female, the most experienced female in the herd, right up until the point that she reaches the age that she's really starting to get quite old. And then you'll start to see probably one of her daughters or her sisters, slightly younger sister, start to step up and take on that role as she reaches old age. So it will usually be the oldest elephant in the group, right up until the matriarch, almost if you can think of it as a retirement age. show they're heading toward twin dams, which I thought they might think about doing. And that's probably because there's hardly any water left in there. Stop here for a moment, just let the little one relax. And this block is very, very thick. I'm not going to go crunching after the herd. We'll see if they continue to move in, and if they do, then we'll loop around rather. We're right very close to Gowrie Main, which is the southern section of Djuma. It's our southern boundary. And for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, this is a live safari. So what you are seeing right now is happening right here on Djuma Game Reserve. And please let us know if you are a new viewer, and we're very, very keen to have your questions and comments. If you want to know anything more about the amazing animals that we see here, then you can do so on #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@wildearth.tv. Ellies are definitely disappearing in here, but they haven't gone very far. So I'm just going to loop around and see if maybe there's a nice opening so that we don't have to make too much noise to get to go and see them. Let's just see what we can find here. There's a very, very thick block. Stop here for now, let them relax a little bit as they're moving through, and we've got lots and lots of big elephants, big females, and a couple of different calves. And calves are so important in an elephant's family in terms of the social bonding between herd members. So every single one of these elephants will be related in some way to each other, whether they're sisters or cousins or aunts or nieces. And the females will stay together in this really, really tightly bonded group. And just thinking about it, now an elephant female invests a great deal in her calves. She will have one calf every 4 to 5 years, roughly. Let me just think about that. Their gestation period is 22 months. They lactate for another 2 years after that. And then they're pregnant for another two years after that. So it would actually be one calf maybe every 6 years. And ellies can live right up until their 60s, but they won't continue bearing calves right up until the end. So in their lifetime, a female could probably have between 6 and 7 calves. So Jean, I hope that answers your question about how many calves a female will have within her lifetime. And in terms of herd protection and herd dynamics, every single calf is treated equally, whether it is the matriarchs or one of the younger females. They are all looked after very, very carefully by the herd members. And when a female has her first baby, the older females will be around to help her, teach her how to be a mother and how to look after that baby. And there are some incredible stories. I know that there was one from the Kruger maybe a year or two ago, where a new mom didn't quite understand what was happening to her, and she gave birth to a little baby in the I think it was the Olifants River of Kruger. And this new little baby was really, really struggling, and all of the older females banded together to help that baby elephant up and out of the area. And I've worked in a reserve that implements, it was in the past, I worked on a closed system. So the reserve was fenced, and as part of the management strategy, the reserve contracepted their elephants. And the way that they did it was what's known as immunocontraception. So it's not hormonal, it doesn't impact the elephant's hormones in any way. I'm just going to shift around, see if we can get a better view of these guys as they move into the block, and then we'll talk a little bit about that. Just going to stop again. I know that the visual is very, very difficult, but I don't want to startle them any more than necessary, so we're just going to move slowly, bit by bit. Anyway, I was talking a little bit about that contraception program. Now, this was a closed, fenced-off reserve that was surrounded by farmland. So it was necessary to control the population of elephants, and to do that, they contracepted them. And it was a way of doing it that was immunocontraception, so it was reversible and it didn't impact on their hormones in any way. It was reliant on false antibodies, or antibodies produced by tricking the body to produce antibodies that fit around the layer, so the zona pellucida around the elephant's ovum. So they still ovulated, they still went into estrus. It was just that they couldn't be fertilized in that kind of system. And they were given a booster shot every 2 to 3 years. But what was really, really important to the reserve was that they didn't take away elephant babies completely, because they are so essential towards the cohesion of the herd as a whole, that every single female was allowed to have a calf, naturally, her first calf, and then at slightly longer intervals, she was taken off the contraception and allowed to have a calf. And it is difficult, but it is something that the reserve had to do in order to be able to keep some elephants. They couldn't overpopulate the reserve with elephants, or they would have done quite serious damage to the ecology of the area. And now that our ellies have moved off, I'm going to take loop us around and go back to Gowrie Main and see if we can catch them there on the open area. where would be the best approach to find these ellies again. And while I do, we have a question from Judith from North Carolina. Welcome to the Sunset Safari. There we go, they're going to go into the drainage line. And Judith was wondering if elephants migrate. And the answer is yes, in the past they would have. Definitely, these ellies will cover enormous distances. Typically, they will stick around their natal home ranges, but they could well move further afield if they need to in terms of resources. It tends to be the elephants in the more arid areas that cover a larger distance. Let's just see if we can find a nice clear spot to see these guys. Trying to work out exactly which direction they're moving in. And there's a great deal of talk underway in terms of recreating some of the migration corridors that would have existed for the elephants. And obviously, with human encroachment, there's been a lot more fencing off in areas. These elephants are very, very fortunate in that we are part of the greater Kruger system, so they have an enormous area that they can traverse. Still see them tucked away in there. They don't appear to be moving any further. They might have found a nice feeding patch. I'll try and loop around, see if we can get ahead of them. I'm just going to check the block up ahead. If it is a little bit too thick, then I'm not going to push any harder. I'll probably leave these guys in peace for now. There's quite a considerable drainage line on this side. We're going to leave these ellies in peace for now. This block is very, very thick and there's no easy way for me to get the vehicle in. We can do a little bit of a loop around, see what else we can find, and then maybe come back to them when they've come out a little bit more into the open. But for now, I'm not going to push too far into this block. And over the next few months, we're going to see some interesting changes in terms of all animal movements throughout this reserve. And for elephants, they are very, very water dependent animals. They have a very roughage heavy diet, as you can imagine. And as we've spoken about many times before on these sunsets or these live safaris, they are very inefficient digesters, so they excrete and defecate out about half of what they have taken in. So that requires a lot of water to help that process along. So in terms of elephant movements over the next few months, although the knob thorns are all producing nice green leaves that they're going to be targeting, we're going to see most of the elephants moving around the permanent river systems and around pump or any dams that still are holding water in the area. So their movements are going to be almost entirely based on where they have access to water. But bearing in mind that if an elephant herd wants to, can easily move 20 kilometers in a night and very, very rapidly. So they can cover great, great distances. And it's one of those amazing things about elephants that people have often chatted about in terms of their long-term memories. And it's very common to say that an elephant never forgets. And it's because they pass down the lessons through the generations from mother to daughter as to where to find those watering holes, even in the most difficult and driest of situations. Even in drought experiences, they will know where to go to find water. Days ago we had some really interesting, and it was actually Andrew and myself that time as well, we had some really interesting elephant interactions happening with a mother and 3 young males. One of them was her calf, very clearly, we saw him suckling from her, and then 2 younger males, and we spoke a little bit about how they might have been separated from their herd. And Tamara, I know you were wondering if that little splinter group is okay. And yes, they absolutely are. I'm fairly certain that the next day we were back, we found a nice big elephant herd on Arathusa, very close to where we saw the 4 of them. And I'm almost certain I saw the mother amongst them. It was a very thick area, but she had quite a nice neat flap or notch in her ear, a sort of a curved notch in her right ear. And I'm certain that I saw her, so they've obviously been reunited once again. And Sherry, you were wondering if elephants will cover large distances. If the herds do split, will they cover large distances? Will there be some concern amongst the members of finding each other? And generally they will not stray too far from the main body of the herd, but that depends on the size of the herd itself. So a small herd is very close-knit, but once it gets to the point that it's reached over 20 to 30 animals within the herd, it's not uncommon for it to branch off and split away almost completely. And they'll still associate with their mother herd, so to speak. They will return and have a look around, and if they meet up, it will be a very friendly and joyous greeting between the members of the herds, but they will still be quite happy to move far distances away from their original herd. And that just depends on the situation as well as the resources at the moment, because everything is so incredibly dry and the trees are lacking in nutrients, the grasses are fairly lacking in nutrients. You can imagine how the herds have to spread out as they feed. It's not like you can go and find the nice tree that's right next to your buddy or feed from the same tree. They've actually got to search a little bit harder to get the nutrients that they need. So not uncommon at this time of year for herds to splinter off and then come back together again. But for a small group like that, with that female and the 3 young males, I do think that she would have been very much concerned with trying to find her original herd. In general, the females do not like to be on their own without other females around. My way towards Buffelshoek Dam. I'm sure you've all been wondering what Stef has been up to, and so we're going to send you back across to Stef, and I will be back with you a little bit later.
Welcome back. Elephants. Jamie found it like we did a
back again. We do apologize for Stef's slight signal issue there. And luckily we've got some waterbuck up ahead to keep us entertained, quite possibly the same group that we saw this morning. And I have been looking very, very hard for where that female leopard track went. So for those of you who might have missed the sunrise safari, we had beautifully fresh female leopard tracks, did a loop around, came back and discovered a buffalo herd of about 500 animals had walked over them. Stop here for a moment. Hello, waterbuck. And I've checked around, I'm afraid to say, oh, she's on her way, that I haven't been able to relocate where those tracks disappeared off to. Apparently 500 strong buffalo moving through an area does tend to remove some evidence of tracks. Unbelievably quiet this afternoon. The birds are quiet. All of the animals seem to be taking shelter away from the heat. And there's a special kind of quality to this time of year in terms of the heat. The sun's very, very strong, but it's actually the dryness in the air that really makes it seem hotter than it actually is. Lots of dust. I've been sneezing all day. I think Stef's also been sneezing all day. Be time to go and check those precious remaining water sources. My next plan of action is to head across to Buffelshoek Dam and just see if there's any evidence of that female leopard there. I haven't picked up on her tracks. I completely lost them after the buffalo herd went through, but quite possibly those buffalo are still around that area, and if not, there could well be a predator coming down to have a quick afternoon drink to relieve a little bit of this heat. And very dry. This is actually one of my favorite times of the year to be in the bush. Usually between August and October, I would say actually would be my absolute favorite time, because you get to watch the transition of the seasons and the first incoming rains. You get to enjoy that smell and see all of the flowers start to come back. All of the animals start looking really rather pregnant. But at the same time, the bush isn't too dense and you still get those nice cool evenings. So you get to see a lot further in. You've got a far greater chance of spotting things. You've also still got that chance of seeing something small and nocturnal. It might be out and about earlier than it would typically be during the hot summer months. male steenbokkie, staying as cryptic and hidden as they do so well. Oh, he's just laid down there, tucked away in the shade, and almost completely invisible if you didn't know he was there. That's nice to see. You don't often see steenbok having a little bit of a rest. I'm going to nudge forward just a little bit. You can see if we can get a bit of a better perspective on him. And when I first saw him, I called him a steenbokkie. And that's because it's part of the Afrikaans language. Depending on the word that you are utilizing, I don't think we're going to get a particularly good angle on him. He's right tucked away in there. You can just see his little ears, his little body sticking out. In the Afrikaans language, if you make something a diminutive, so instead of saying little in front of the word, you add either an E sound or a key sound, so a TJIE. So in this case, when I'm referring to a steenbok and I said steenbokkie, I just mean little steenbok. Very well hidden. Just that tiny little ear sticking out. And as we continue on our mission up to Buffelshoek, we're going to try once more to catch up with what Stef has been doing, and we will get back to you a little bit later.
Sorry about that, you caught us a bit unawares over there, and it was just Bryan trying to level the camera so that we could show you this Nyala bull. Him and another male are busy posturing at one another, and you can see that he's erected that mane along his back, along his crest, in what they call a piloerection or a phylloerection. It's when they bristle this mane. They can actually make it a lot more impressive than this. I have no doubt that he's going to try and do it to this male over here. And it's just these males just trying to posture at one another without the need to fight. They can show each other who's the biggest Nyala, and therefore avoid a fight if they can, which of course is neither good for both parties. No one wants to get injured. It's impressive, this guy. Prime example of a Nyala. Have a look at that. Wow. Oof, sorry, excuse me, you just got me swatting some flies. I've had some feedback on my Tragelaphus question. Well, I pitched a Tragelaphus statement, to which a question, what is a Tragelaphus, came back, and I didn't know, so I sent it out to our viewers to give us some feedback. And Dennis from Lakeville says that some Tragelaphus antelope were found, some spiral horned antelope were found at the Olduvai Gorge in the Pleistocene, and were up to 20% larger than today's. Now that's quite massive. That's on a male kudu. It's probably about 60 kilograms on a male kudu. That's quite big. Let me see these two guys. I don't know what they're going to be doing. This other male, he's coming out of the bush now. I don't quite know which one of the two is bigger. He's also very impressive. Massive shoulders. He's actually got a better body, I think. And then Dennis has also sent through a definition for Tragelaphus, which basically says that the genus Tragelaphus has several types of bovine in it, all of which are pretty much antelope-like. And all the species in this genus tend to be large-sized, lightly built, which is exactly what you're looking at the moment. A fairly long necks and considerable dimorphism between the sexes, or sexual dimorphism, which is absolutely apparent in the Nyala. I think of all of them, the Nyala probably has the biggest dimorphism. You can see that very careful step that he's got going there. That's the beginnings of this display that they're going to have with one another. There he turns to the side, presenting himself, flares his tail, flares the crest. There you can see the crest going up. And it's just like two muscle guys that stand there and pose at one another. They're just showing, there we go. And can also end up in a lot of lip smacking. He's not doing it at the moment, he's hearing something else around here. They can also arch their necks, making their profiles look even bigger and more menacing. And then of course, if the two are evenly matched, even at this point, then a fight is inevitable. And males with horn points that are almost parallel, like these two are, you can see those horn tips are parallel to one another. He is a mating bull. They can do serious damage to each other with those two horns. They're designed to slip past the opponent's guard. And you can imagine it just needs to go into the chest cavity just a little bit to do terminal damage, actually. Let's see if we can get around, see if we can see some more of this display. Now he's actually seen off this other male. So yeah, not much more to show. All right. So let's leave these Nyala and carry on with our drive. The sun is just at that angle at the moment. It's catching us quite intensely in our faces, so it looks like I'm trying to shield my face. It's because I am. So on my quest today to go and have a look at the dams. We've got a maribou stork fishing in the dam. Let's go and have a look there. They're one of the most, unfortunately for them, one of the ugliest birds that occur out here. I really battle to find redeeming features. From a physical appearance point of view, I think the bird is a fantastic bird. There's some monkeys. Now that bird stands as tall as what I do, believe it or not. A good 6 foot, and has a 9 meter or 18 feet wingspan. Sorry, not 9 meter, 3 meter, can you believe it? A 9 foot wingspan, excuse me. So that is exactly 3 meters, 9 feet. unbelievable. And have a look at its white legs. These birds defecate on their legs and let the urine and the feces evaporate on their legs, and then they pump a lot of blood into their feet or into their legs, and through evapotranspiration cool their body temperature down. Have you ever heard of something as bizarre as that? Fly just bit Bryan on his arm. Excuse that shake there. And this dam is getting shallow enough that these catfish are proving an irresistible meal. No, he doesn't want to fish now with us being over here. For those of you with access to Djuma Cam, I'm sure you'll be able to watch him fish for the rest of the afternoon. Let's go and have a look at these monkeys over here, these little vervet monkeys. See if we can get them into this tree. It can be quite comical. There we go. Beautiful view of a vervet monkey scratching his arm. Live in troops where the males live in a hierarchical system where it doesn't matter what male comes in, he can fight for a top spot, but the females are born into their station. They do not rise out of their station, and a more dominant female will be given preference at food and will also therefore have the most babies that survive into adulthood. Let's go forward a little bit. We can see him all that well from your angle. Having the camera pointed at them is like having a big eye pointed at their antiques, and he's just going to go and sit at exactly the opposite end of the tree to where we are. Keeping his eye out on the bush around him. I really enjoy these little vervets in the bush because they're one of the best leopard spotters that you can get. You can see how alert they are, looking into the sky and looking down at the ground. Leopard and eagle will take monkeys given the opportunity. Alright, and they actually don't look like they're playing with us at all. So Joan in England has actually asked me for a favor, which I'd be happy to oblige. Joan has asked that we try and add a bird to her live drive, and has asked us to have another quick look at this maribou stork. And I thought that it would be a good idea, because next to the maribou stork is a woolly-necked stork, which is on the right there, Bryan. And there's a waterbuck in the background as well. But let's first have a look at the maribou stork. So that's a maribou stork. And then if you go right over there, Bryan, there's the woolly-necked stork with a vervet monkey just behind the woolly-necked stork. And if we go right, probably keeping the same line, sorry, left, there's a waterbuck standing around about, in the background, there we go, there's a waterbuck. So quite a lot coming out. Just a nice big bull waterbuck. Oh, that's a nice picture. Quite majestic, these antelope, these waterbuck. So on waterbuck, they are one of the most common waterbuck, or they were one of the most common large antelope species that we have out here. And Sherry in Colorado has asked that exact question. Is waterbuck a common antelope? Do we see it often here? Is it one of the most common ones in Africa? And Sherry, absolutely. It's the symbol of the Sabi Sands, the waterbuck. Very common antelope to find in this latitude of the Kruger National Park. You don't really see that many of them further north or further south. You get this band sort of in the middle, 60% of the park basically, which is just full of waterbuck. But depending on where you go, they can actually be fairly common. I saw a lot of them in Zambia. Not as much as what you see Puku or Lechwe in some areas of Botswana, but definitely a lot of them in Zambia. Not so many of them in Namibia. Think carefully about saying this. I would say that one of the densest populations of waterbuck is the Kruger National Park, that I've at least seen anyway. Love to hear what my colleagues say. And there in the background you've got Djuma Camp. We're not going to be able to zoom in too much more. In actual fact, I think we zoom out and we carry on with our day. Quite glad that we got to see all that stuff, eh? I hope that helped with your Joan, I hope that helped with your bird list, Joan. Not with your Joan list bird. My backwards brain coming into play again. Alright, we're just going to bump up this section over here. Looking at that cute little monkey that we were seeing a little bit earlier. You know, I really like monkeys outside of the camp because they are beneficial to finding leopard. Cameron, who is only 5 years old and a devout follower of WildEarth, has asked if you can pick them up if they're nice and cute and cuddly. I think cute stops at about me looking at them. Cuddly, not so much. I think they'll give you a nasty bite. They're definitely not tame, Cameron. They don't come and eat from your hand. If anything, if people start feeding them, they actually get quite aggressive. They'll come and take food from people. And I know in some parts of the country they've actually had to be euthanized for biting children and biting people quite badly. So, not tame animals at all. We try as much as we can out here to keep all our rubbish firm or tightly locked away. And we don't leave food lying around specifically for that reason. We don't want to get these monkeys used to the fact that they see us or people as opportunistic for food. And then similarly on the monkey topic, Judith in North Carolina wants to know if a lion or leopard chases a vervet monkey into a tree, will it throw sticks at that lion or urinate and defecate on it? I'm going to say yes to that question, Judith, as bizarre as what it sounds. I once watched a leopard kill a baboon, and the baboon, the rest of the baboon troop charged down to this leopard and forced this leopard to go into a crevice, and in that crevice it was stuck. And then the baboons, whatever they could get, lay their hands onto in the area, they threw down on top of this leopard, even pushing down big plants, aloes, pushing down sticks, pushing down big rocks, like rocks this big. It was absolutely amazing to see. I don't think it's a common thing to do, to be honest. I think most of the time they just go to the top of the tree and scream and shout and shake bushes and really go mad. But in this particular case, we definitely saw this behavior. So from my experience, yes. From one watering hole to another then. That's a good time to go through to Jamie. I hear Jamie has just arrived at Buffelshoek Dam, and there's some action going on over there. Or I think there's some action going on there at least. And I'm sure she wants to tell you all about it. So we're going to carry on with our drive. We're going to find something to keep you interested in, and we'll see you a bit later.
Welcome back, and we are sitting at Buffelshoek Dam, where once again Bob the Bachelor of Buffelshoek is acting as an island for these slightly chilly terrapin. They're just using him as a great spot to sit up and sun themselves. There's only 2 of them at the moment. I'm sure he's acted as an island for more than that on occasion. But for these little guys, they are ectotherms, so they're reliant on the external forces to help them regulate their own internal body temperature, which means taking an opportunity to sun themselves every now and again, especially living in a slightly chilly aquatic environment. And terrapins are that curious halfway mixture between turtles and tortoises. So turtles, for those of you who might be a little bit confused about the linguistic distinction, turtles are purely aquatic and they have flippers. Tortoises are purely terrestrial and have feet, and terrapins fall somewhere in between. So they can move both on land and in water, and they have slightly webbed feet to help them swim through this area. And they're also exceptionally smelly creatures. And in summer you always have to be very careful driving through puddles in the road, just to make sure that you don't squash any unsuspecting terrapins, because they do have that terrestrial ability. They do move between different water sources. Drive very, very slowly, allowing them the opportunity to surf away from your wheels. And other than that, Buffelshoek Dam is pretty much completely devoid, or seemingly devoid, of at least any mammal life, apart from Bob. one Nyala who looks like she might be coming to drink. I've just lifted my head up to see her. She's just emerged out of nowhere. Looks like she's approaching very carefully down to the dam, stopping to investigate first. And watching animals approach to drink is always quite an entertaining lesson in animal behavior. They're very, very cautious because they know that coming down to drink, there's a very strong possibility of being ambushed by something hiding up in the shade close to a dam. And of course the ever-present threat of crocodiles is also a consideration, although I haven't seen a crocodile in any of the dams in quite a while. Watch how carefully and slowly she approaches. There's two of them. There's one up on the dam wall as well, disappearing off down the back. And you can see how she takes 2 steps and stops and listens and sniffs. 2 steps, 3 steps, stop and listen. Very cautious, very considered approach down to the water. Very nimble, delicate hooves. And stop. And stop. She's decided that all seems to be clear. She might have an opportunity to come down to the water. Still quite carefully circumnavigating, double checking up on any movement that there might be. And here comes her friend, who sort of was hanging back behind her just to make sure the coast was completely clear before making her approach. Now, Nyala are fairly water dependent and they will drink every day if there's water available. They're not typically seen dwelling into the more arid areas of South Africa. So this is quite a common time of day for them to come down. Usually these antelope will come down just before sunset, but they will drink at night as well. But typically they would prefer to hide away at night in the thick drainage lines and leave the drinking for the early morning and the late afternoon. And Bob is acting as a casual spectator. Thirsty in Nyala on this hot afternoon. And as with all antelope, their drinking process is usually relatively brief. Lingering too long at the water's edge might make you an easy target for a crocodile that might be lurking. And it's time to move out of the open and back into their secretive, denser habitat around the drainage line. Delicate, very nimble antelope, and one of the first to really habituate and get used to humans around a lodge. Very, very common to have garden Nyala who come through to feed on the lawns that tend to be watered around some of the lodges around here, and some of the greener vegetation that grows up around water pipes. And we have one that lives at camp with us, or comes through at least every now and again, a male Nyala, and he hops straight over the fence that surrounds our camp with relative ease. He basically just bounces over it from a standing start. And the fence is probably about my height. Very well adapted for being agile and quick. Bob, our bachelor of Buffelshoek, doesn't seem to be up to too much. I think he's quite content to spend the afternoon relaxing with his newly acquired terrapin friends and to act as their little island in the middle of the dam. And there doesn't seem to be much other activity. And I think it might be time for us to move towards the shadier areas. My aim for this afternoon is to be around Gowrie Main, towards the last sort of setting rays of the sun as it starts to get much cooler. And that's because, as I'm sure Stef has updated you, those Birmingham boys are right there just a couple of 100 meters south of our boundary, and they have split up the Matimba males. They're sort of in between the two of them. And I do think that tonight is going to be a very defining moment in the lives of both the Birmingham boys and the Matimba males. Bob and his terrapin friends. Astrolina, we were talking a little bit about the distinction between the turtles, terrapins and tortoises of the area. And yes, you are absolutely correct in terms of their categorization. Turtles are seawater dwelling creatures. Terrapins are freshwater dwelling and then a little bit terrestrial on the side. And then tortoises are completely terrestrial. And to the best of my knowledge, although we do have, I think it's something in the region of 14 or 15 different tortoise species in South Africa, there is only one that is capable of swimming, and that is the most commonly seen, that is the leopard tortoise that we see fairly regularly in this area. Of these water holes now drying up towards the end of the dry season, and hopefully we'll be getting rain somewhere in the next few months. Bob in Iowa, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. It is great to have you on board with us. Now Bob would like to know where the terrapins go when the dams start to dry up, and that very much depends on their proximity to other water sources. Those closer to the rivers might be able to make it, is they can travel a good couple of kilometers on dry land before they need to find some more water. Unfortunately, a lot of them will be picked up and carried away by predators. Something like a fish eagle could well pick up a terrapin, and what they'll do is they'll fly up high and then drop them down onto the ground to break open the shells. So a lot of the terrapins, as it does start to get drier, will die off. But some of them will find a nice safe place. A lot of them will have spent this winter estivating. So when the temperatures are nice and low, they find a nice safe spot and hide away and slow their metabolic rate in the same way that tortoises do. It's not quite hibernation because they can come out of it very, very quickly. But a lot of them pass the time in that manner. Unfortunately, when it does get a little bit hotter, it's very difficult for them to do that, and they really do need to go on a fresh water search. Leave Bob to his existence in Buffelshoek Dam with his terrapin friends. Gracie, who is 8 years old, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. I do hope that you enjoy your time with us and learn a great deal about this magical land. I'm so glad that we get to share it with you. And Gracie, you were wondering if Bob misses his female companion, and I'm sure he's fine without her. He's chosen, don't forget that he's more than capable. He looks like a healthy, happy hippo, and I'm sure that if he did want to go and find her, he could set off. He's probably not far from wherever she has moved to. She might have moved across to, say, Sydney's dam or one of the bigger dams up in Buffelshoek, and maybe he just likes to move between her and enjoys a little bit of solitude every now and again. So I'm sure he's not too sad, and he's more than capable of going to find her if he does get a little bit lonely. Perhaps he's just enjoying some peace and quiet to himself for now. And I think that it's wonderful that you say a prayer to Bob every night. I think that's very special. And I'm sure that it will do him plenty of good in the times to come. I mean, luckily he's chosen a really, really good dam. Buffelshoek is a fantastically constructed and positioned dam. It's really nice and waterproof, and it's really kept that water nice and constant throughout this dry period. So he's found himself a good place, and maybe even when some of the other dams start to disappear, his lady friend might decide to come back and join him. And we saw the other day with Stef that Buffelshoek Dam is still really nice and deep. If an elephant is capable of wading in and almost submerging itself completely, there's going to be plenty of water over the next 2 dry months to come. I think that there's a very good chance that if we do come back to Buffelshoek over the next few days and Bob has left for a while, I think there's quite a strong possibility that he's gone to visit Daisy and some other hippos just to get some company. Of the various dams in the area where some of the hippos do tend to reside, Stef has been exploring around Sydney's dam, and we just want to have a look at whatever he might have found in that particular area. I will be back with you a little bit later.
Welcome back, and we're still on our journey to check all the water holes that we can in the area, and it's going quite well, I must say. We've just been at Sydney's dam. A couple of hippo there, but we've got quite a bad signal there today. It keeps on dropping, so we couldn't share them with you. The hippo were quite far away, and now I've decided to come and have a look at Red Dam, which is where we saw the kudu this morning, and see what we can find over there. It was also the last place that Sindile was seen last night, there and thereabout, and he quite enjoys the little drainage line that feeds Red Dam. So we're going to be going to go and we are going to go to see there. In the meantime, just bear with us with a squeak. Old Wendy over here, she's something on her is deciding to run out of oil, and she's developed an intense squeak that you may or may not be able to pick up, but it's slowly but surely driving nails into Bryan and my skull. But teaching us a little bit of patience in the going. A lovely afternoon so far. Not too much out in the form of wildlife, large wildlife. I think a couple of elephant, some fresh tracks of some buffalo up and down. No lion, no leopard tracks. A lot of hyena tracks around, you know, as always. Through this Gowrie thicket. And keeping our eyes in the shade, seeing what's around. There's an African there was an African hoopoe in the tree. One of those few birds that don't enjoy their camera being pointed at them. As soon as you point the camera at them, boop, there they go. I must be honest, the odd fly that's been around today, they've been a bit of an irritation, but nothing like they were 2 or 3 days ago. It was intense 2 or 3 days ago. Today, not so bad. I mean, they're there, you go through these patches where they drive you up the wall, but for the most part, what have we got here? Is it a stick underneath the car? Yeah, I think so. There's this very deceptive drag mark on the floor. It looks like a hoof. In actual fact, it's just a stick that was caught or lodged underneath the vehicle. It was dragged by a car that was in front of us, not by us, giving a drag mark appearance on the floor, which makes it look like a carcass was being dragged. And talking about the flies that we're busy mopping away, Sandy in Palm Springs has asked what's happened to my burning elephant dung. Sandy, it was elephant dung, not buffalo dung, but I still have my burner. Here it is over here. There we go. dusting face. Schoolboy era. Yeah, rookie, as Bryan would say. But the flies haven't really been bad enough for us to consider lighting it. I'm trying to keep lighting it at a minimum. It does pose some risk of fire, and I'm trying to reduce that risk as much as what I can. So we'll use it when it gets really bad, and we'll tolerate them when it's not so bad. At the moment, not too bad. It's not to say that that won't change as we go on. Take the opportunity at this junction to switch off and listen for a bit. Excuse the bumps, it's a particularly bad stretch of road here. Ooh, switching off the car gives us some blessed relief from that whine. Listening for is just again the telltale signs of anything giving an alarm call. There's nothing immediately apparent, not even birds at this moment. And from exactly the same spot this morning, we were listening to the bush with a lot of bird calls. Easy about 10 different species of birds were calling this morning. But it is because it's still quite hot. Birds will start calling again in about half an hour or so, I'm sure. Anyway, nothing immediately apparent. So I think let's carry on with our journey. Going to go and have a look at these pans and dams in the area and see if we can pick up any sign or trace of a leopard. It's been a wonderful afternoon so far. As I was saying, biggest surprise for me for the afternoon was actually finding that flowering knobthorn. That so far has been the highlight of my week. I said, no, maybe not my week, but definitely of the day. And while myself and Bryan get reacquainted with Arethusa, we're going to send you through to Jamie, who's got a monkey story to relate to you. We'll see you in a bit.
Welcome back, and as we continue our search for the different animals that this reserve has to offer, I hear that Stef has been chatting a little bit about monkeys and stories about them being chased up trees and urinating on the predators below them. Now, when I was a little girl, we often used to go and stay at the various lodges in and around Kruger. And although it's been very much improved in the last 20 odd years since I was a little girl, in those days the rubbish used to be very much left unprotected, and the monkeys got very, very used to people very, very quickly. And I remember distinctly being given a little bit of money by my parents to go. I think I must have been going to get something from one of the shops, maybe an ice cream or something along those lines. I was walking on my own barefoot down the path, and I've always been a little bit animal crazy, obviously. That's just an intrinsic part of my personality. And I was wandering down the path, and these monkeys decided that whatever I had in my hand was probably food, and they descended upon me. Now, I must have been, I don't know, probably about 5, maybe 4 years old. I was very, very tiny. I remember being quite terrified by the sudden surrounding of monkeys all screeching at me and grabbing at my clothes. And I was very, very lucky to avoid being bitten in that particular case, because I don't think at that age I knew how to respond properly or in the way that I needed to. I did a lot of screaming, and one of the big females managed to grab my hand and pull it open completely. I had my hand clenched around the money, and she obviously thought that I had food or something along those lines, pulled it open, and then shot me a very disgusted look when she realized that it was nothing interesting for her to see. And at this point, I'm fairly certain I was screaming my head off, because I have a very vivid image of my father and grandfather sprinting manically down the path with sticks in their hands to chase the monkeys away from the little me. And it was a very important lesson, because I did something then that I should never have done, which was try and run away from the monkeys. And that was my first big lesson in terms of not running away. And my cousin actually learnt an even harsher lesson. My cousins and I were very, very close in age. We grew up together. And my older cousin, who I think was 6 years older than me at the time, or 6 years older than me, she was also completely animal crazy. And we were walking past a troop of monkeys that had a little, tiny little baby that was on the ground picking at the bits of fruit. And Mommy had walked away a little bit, and my cousin decided that she was going to go and pick this baby up and give it a bit of a cuddle. And Mommy really, really didn't like that, and my cousin ended up with quite a nasty bite to her leg. And an important lesson learned for all of us about trying to approach wild animals. We did a lot of learning in those years and a lot of exploring the area around us. But I do remember those as some of the more harsh lessons that nature had to offer. Luckily, in all of the camps that I've worked in since then, there's been a huge improvement and awareness in terms of not feeding the animals around camp, as well as making sure that your rubbish is really well protected, so that the animals don't learn that it's a good idea to approach humans and come and dig through the rubbish. The one thing I can't say has ever happened to me is I have never yet been urinated on by a vervet monkey. But never say never, my time could well be coming. Really distinctly remember an experience with baboons, also at some lodge. I can't remember now where we were, but it was on one of our many family travels and explorations, and we left some rusks. Now, for those of you who don't know rusks, it's a very traditional South African, it's a very hard biscuit. Quite often we give them to toddlers who are teething to chew on, and you can't really eat them dry. You have to dunk them into coffee or tea to soften them up a little bit. But we left a packet of muesli rusks sitting on the table outside, and we noticed a baboon had moved in and was really quite enjoying our breakfast. And after we chased him away, he ran about 10 meters away and sat on a fallen log and looked at us with one of the most human expressions I have ever seen on an animal. It was complete disappointment at the fact that we'd robbed him of what was probably a really, really yummy breakfast for a baboon. had numerous experiences where we've accidentally left a window open, and either monkeys or baboons have made their way into the kitchen. And I promise you, there is nothing like the mess that baboons or monkeys can create in a kitchen. They will tear open everything. They will get into absolutely everything. They will open jars. They will smash glasses. It looks like an absolute bomb site when you return to that kind of destruction. Now that I'm thinking about it, I've actually got lots of strange moments with baboons and monkeys. I remember sitting right at the top of Blind River Canyon at the Three Rondables, which is the most incredible view site. The Blind River Canyon is, I think, the third largest canyon in the world, and it really is absolutely beautiful. It's very, very green. It's the second largest green canyon in the world, or the largest green canyon. And I was sitting in the car with lunch, which was a ham sandwich, and a baboon shot through one window, took it out of my hand, and jumped out of the other window before I even had a chance to register what was happening. And my little brother, who is... He can be quite nervous around in the bush and around the animals that are here. And I just remember that frozen look of shock on his face because he was sitting in the seat next to him and the baboon had actually jumped on him and then out of the window. Just sheer surprise. So we've had a lot of adventures with monkeys and baboons. And it's very, very important to remember that however tame they might seem to be, they are wild animals. And they should be treated as such. Definitely seen some male baboons that probably quite easily outweigh me or are at least my weight. Not something that any animal really wants to mess with. Even leopards are quite cautious about approaching baboons and trying to stalk them because a couple baboon troops are ruled by in a system known as oligarchy. So they've got a couple of really, really big males that look after and protect the group. And they've got canines to match any leopard and incredible brute strength. So even leopards will think twice before taking them on. And I know many stories of leopards the tables being turned on a hunted leopard. I even saw one being chased by a male baboon once. We're talking about various animal encounters that I've had in the past. Lindsay, welcome to the Sunset Safari. Lindsay wants to know if I've had any scary experiences with the Big Five. Yes, I definitely have. I've had several scary experiences with the Big Five. It comes as part of the job and it comes with a level of awareness and respect for the animals that you are working with. So as trained as we are and aware as we are of the way that we need to respond, especially when out on foot in the bush, you do have moments when you will encounter animals and it's important to know exactly how to respond. So no matter how many times you walk into lions, there is still that intrinsic part of you that immediately causes a stimulation of adrenaline rush when the bushes in front of you start growling and moving around. And I've had a couple of times where I've surprised both myself and the lions, and they do tend to vocalize their displeasure in a very almost blood-curdling way. I've done it before where we were 5 meters from the lions, took one step too close and the bushes erupted into growls. I had a leopard explode out of bushes close to my feet before and disappear off with just a brrr and gone. And probably my scariest moment was in a reserve far away from here, where I was charged by a black rhino. I was with 2 other guides. I was walking behind the lead guide. And it could well be, Andrew's just spotted some leopard tracks. Are they on my right?
Yeah.
Oh yes, there we go. Sure, Andrew. Doing fantastic leopard track spotting today.
Thank you.
Now I think this might be the same individual that we had tracks for this morning. They have been driven over, but they were walking very much in this direction. Now, leopards, as with other predators, do tend to utilize the roads quite often as a way of walking very, very quietly. They're still on the road, right at the junction of Nyala Road South and Vulture's Nest, and they move across here, straight across into this drainage line. Now I know that we can drive a little way up there, so let's give it a go and just see, maybe we get lucky with this leopard that we've been tracking. And while I do that, I was busy finishing up on my black rhino story. So walking unarmed with one guide in front of me, one behind me, and we measured. I've been charged by quite a few animals in my time in the bush, and this was the one time that I really genuinely thought that this animal was absolutely not going to stop. She stopped at 2, she didn't even stop, she charged full speed and turned in the circle of her body, if that makes sense. She turned around and turned her charge away from us and carried on running. That was probably my most frightening Big 5 experience. Now I'm going to just check this drainage line. And then if I don't find anything in here, then I'm definitely going to hop out to track. We can hear a lot of shouting in the tree next to us. I'm just going to stop for a moment so we can listen to this. And that somewhat harsh call belongs to the Lilac Breasted Rollers.
Can you see them?
There was one, no, I think most of them have flown away. There was a bit of a confrontation between 3 of them. I can hear one of them. Let me move forward a little bit. I can see one. I can see 2 actually. There's one that's nicely clear, the other one's right at the back. There we go. And they were just having a little bit of a shout at each other. I think one got too much in the other's space. And we are getting to the point where it is the breeding season for these Lilac Breasted Rollers. And we'll start to see those characteristic displays that the birds get their names from. And that's because when they are displaying to their mates, they do a very rocking side-to-side motion, almost like they're rolling in flight. Hence the name rollers. And for one of the most beautiful, most colorful birds that we get out here, they do have quite an ugly call. And the squirrels are just spectating, huddled up together on the branch, trying to stay out of trouble, I think, in this situation. might be our victor in this case. I can still hear one of them sort of muttering under its breath, if I could describe it like that. Making its displeasure known. Here we go. Very, very angry. Just want to sit a moment longer, see if they have another go at each other. Could be that we have a male and a female on this tree, because there was a third one who has since flown away. And I think these two might have reacted very strongly to that one. That bird's body language that he or she is still fairly upset, tail quivering with anger, and I'm sure that was to do with that third individual that has now flown off. Truly spectacular birds with a call that doesn't quite seem to fit with their beautiful image. Now in a lot of cultures, the bird of peace is considered to be the dove. And in African culture, the bird of peace is actually the Lilac Breasted Roller, and considered by many to be the unofficial national bird of Botswana. The true national bird is the cattle egret, which is a little bit more nondescript than these beautiful birds. But they are indeed considered to be the bird of peace and reconciliation within this area. And in a strange sort of converse way, the dove can actually be a symbol of conflict out here, a symbol of conflict and war, because of the way that they fight very aggressively over mating opportunities. Peggy's got it absolutely right. They do indeed have a very ugly call, and I think likening it to an impala in rut is a perfect description. Very harsh sounding call. Not at all suiting their physical appearance. You'd imagine a bird as beautiful as this to have a really pretty song. But generally those beautiful songbirds tend to be the most nondescriptive birds. The larks and the wren warblers, little brown things that hide away in the foliage, they tend to be the ones with the most beautiful calls. And I think the drama has died down. There doesn't appear to be too much . And I mentioned that I think this might be a male and a female pair. And Ginny was wondering if lilac breasted rollers mate for life. And I don't think so. I think they are monogamous, but only seasonally so. But I could be wrong about that. And I think that's a really, really interesting question. But we do see them competing and displaying every year, which makes me think that they are only seasonally monogamous. And for something in the region of 90% of bird species are monogamous, either throughout their lives or just from year to year. Quite unusual in the animal kingdom in that respect. Just having a look now, see if my book says anything about it. There's no info in my bird book about it at the moment, but my guess would be no. We've got some starlings as well who have joined this bird party. Quite a few of them. And those colors are so extraordinary. We get a couple of different species of starling throughout this area, mostly the birchels and the blue-eared starlings. Now, we chatted a little bit about the mating display of the rollers. Oop, on his way. And I mentioned that that is where they get their name from. And I'm just wondering, this one appears to have darted off to make sure that the intruder has been properly chased away. And when these rollers are displaying, they essentially stick out their wings. The males especially, they will stick out their wings and then rock from side to side, almost on an axis of about 270 degrees or even more. So they look almost like they are rolling, although they're not, they are rocking. But they move from side to side very, very rapidly, and usually accompanied by quite a steep descent, as you can imagine, because they're not flapping to keep airborne. And I'm sure that over the next month or two, we will actually be able to start showing you those mating displays. This is definitely a very peaceful way to spend an afternoon down in the drainage line. We're nice and sheltered from the heat down here. Now, I do know that my ability to drive through this drainage line only extends for another 50 meters or so, but I'm going to continue down it just to see if we get lucky with those leopard tracks. Having seen them this afternoon, I do think that they are from late last night or early this morning. There was a bird walking through them just as we came down into this or around this drainage line. But let's keep looking. See if we can work out where she went from here. Making sure that I'm in diff lock as we go through quite a thick sandy patch. I feel like I've had my fair share of being stuck this week. And drainage lines like this, as beautiful as they are also a really perfect place for a little leopard to hide. Especially because they do come with such abundant prey. Possibly not the best visual, but tucked away in there is an animal that I actually don't see that often around here, and that is because they are so shy and secretive and generally tucked away in these drainage lines. And it's little bushbuck like this that make these drainage lines a perfect hiding place for leopard. When you look closely, these drainage lines are really teeming with life. And this little bushbuck, you can see how similar she looks to Nyala females, and that's because they are very, very closely related. The difference is that little bushbuck are a little bit smaller, and they don't have the same stripe pattern or the very distinctive stripes that Nyala have. But all part of the same spiral-horned family. So they are all spiral-horned antelope. And in terms of scary moments I've had whilst walking in the bush, I would say that these little antelope have probably been responsible for a good 40 to 50% of those moments. I spent a lot of time walking through riverbeds where they like to hide in reeds, and there's nothing like a bushbuck that's decided to pop out right at the last minute, right next to you, just to get that heart rate pumping. And they do have a unique way of just waiting right up until you are almost on top of them before deciding to flee. And that's because they are so reliant on their camouflage and their secretive nature to keep them hidden, that they'll only give themselves away by movement at the very last moment. Sweet, very beautiful antelope. Let's see how it's completely disappeared. And just a flash of movement through the undergrowth. Definitely not something I can see with my naked eye, just sitting here. And we still have a couple of meters to go in this drainage line, and let us continue onwards on our search for this mysterious leopard. Could well be Karula, I don't know for sure. Obviously it's impossible to tell from the tracks. See how stunning the scenery is with these beautiful big jackberry and tambuiti trees. Might be one of my favorite spots on Djuma. as we reach the end of our drainage line road, Judith from North Carolina would like to know if this would be a flowing river during our rainy season or if it would flood. And most definitely, I do not think we'd be able to do this in the rainy season. In high levels of rain, so right at the peak of our rainy season, this would definitely flow. This particular drainage line is part of the Mulwati, so a named water system that runs through Djuma, all the way from the north on Buffelshoek cut line, all the way down to Gowrie, Maine, where it exits as quite a large drainage line. And it would, even if it's not flooding at the time or not flowing, it would still be very, very tricky to navigate a car through the sand once it is waterlogged. It would probably be fairly foolish and involve another rescue operation. But we have reached the end of our road here. As you can see, there is a very fallen tree right in our way, and we are going to have to reverse back along the drainage line. There's no sign of our mysterious leopard. And while I navigate my way out, which is going to be fairly tricky as most of it will have to be done in reverse until I can turn around, we're going to cut back across to Stef and see what he's been up to, and I will catch up with you once I'm out of this drainage line again.
Have a look at that sunset over the bush and over up on it. We've come to Red Dam, and we've come here to look for any signs of Sindile. And I must say, we haven't been too lucky just yet. We did find where he walked away last night from, where he was last night, to this position. So I definitely know he's here somewhere. I tracked him into the block, heading right to this dam, but I couldn't find him here. We thought we'd come and have a look around here, and the only thing that we got drinking some water at the moment are some doves taking a bath. Let's have a look over there and see if you can see them. The afternoon flight of turtle doves. There's a three-banded plover there. Where that dove is, right in front of that dove is a three-banded plover. And it's a wonderfully peaceful afternoon over here. To us. Let's carry on going. Let's follow this drainage line a little bit and see if anything materializes out of it. I heard that you were looking for, well, Jamie found some leopard tracks, and then all of a sudden there were some bird alarm calls, and then you went into a birding party. All very exciting. Let's give Jamie some time to unravel that puzzle. On with our own search. Bryan and I have noticed that it's been incredibly dusty today. Somewhere along the line there's some dust blowing, and it hasn't been particularly windy where we are. There definitely is this charged feeling . If it's just all this dust sort of preempts, in summertime would preempt a rainstorm, and you get the same feeling as the wind kicks up all the dust in the atmosphere. It starts to stick to your skin and stick to everything, and you get this similar rough feeling to everything. Your hands and all the equipment gets covered in dust. The steering wheel actually gets quite rough. But at the same time, I could actually be just imagining it because of that knobthorn flowering that we saw a little bit earlier today. Doesn't sound like much, but change of the seasons out here are heralded with a lot of excitement across the board, not only from guides like myself, but also for the animals. This time of the year is very tough for animals, and only really it's geared like that. Only really the strongest survive. And from all we can decide, or all the scientists can decipher, we're about to go into an El Nino event, which is a 10-year drought cycle that actually starts in South America, can you believe it? Where a current, rather than coming into the Southern Ocean and coming into the Indian Ocean, actually moves up the Chilean coast and disturbs weather patterns in the southern hemisphere. Most notably on the west coast. What is that? Just hold on there, Bryan. Looks deceptively like a rock, but it is a buffalo. Can you believe it? I found something that is moving. There we go. Single bull buffalo that's busy enjoying the calm and the peace and the quiet away from the herd and of this drainage line. There you get to see him. Not much more than a black rock, as you saw. Rather than embarrass myself first by asking Bryan to go and identify it for me, I thought that I'd idea to some binoculars. And I have to retain my ego over here somewhere along the line. Polish it up. He disappears into the thick bush for the evening. Pretty typical of big male buffalo to find refuge in thickets like that. And he'll spend most of the evening there chewing the cud. He might feed locally, he won't be moving anywhere. He might feed locally, but definitely just lying up in the thick bush, making sure that he's got all his quarters covered. And basically just taking it easy and trying to stay out of lions' mouths. I think we move on. There are more spotty things to find. Just unraveled a portion of the puzzle, and I'm sure she wants to update you on what that is. So without further ado, I'm going to send you through to Jamie. We'll keep you updated on our side.
So, not quite maybe the kill that you were expecting, but this hornbill is definitely savaging the dung for the various insects that are within it. He's been keeping us highly entertained, and I didn't want to drive any further and disturb him. And the francolin is contributing his voice to the evening chorus. Also furiously feeding away, picking up the various seeds that are in the area. disappeared across the road. We just had that brief visual of the spur that sits on the back of their legs, which is hopefully, if he comes out a little bit towards us and into the open, we can have another look at. And they use that spur at the back there to incredibly effective fighting weapon. There you can see it sticking up there just as he's moving. It's quite high up in his leg. Head in the way, sorry. Just sticks up. It's probably about 1 centimeter or 2 above the base of the foot. And they use those spurs very viciously to fight against each other. It amazes me how very busy francolins always manage to look. Very energetic looking birds. And they are actually stunning birds when you stop to look at how perfect they are with that color combination. Really, really beautiful to look at. So just an awesome little view of some of the fun bird life, and often we overlook the little things as we look for the big things, but it's really always important to stop and observe what's happening around you and all of the mysteries that the bush has to offer. It's one of my favorite things about being out here. I do so enjoy taking the time every now and again to just stop and watch some of the small stuff that's happening around you. Now, I'm slowly making my way towards Gowrie, Maine, to see if those Birmingham boys either decide to cross back onto Djuma or at least decide to give us some vocalizations. And maybe we could get an idea as to what is happening on that side of things, as well as what kind of response the Matimba males are going to offer to their intrusion into their territory. And as I head across in that direction, I'm going to go back across to Stef, and we will be back with you a little bit later.
Welcome back. So it wasn't a piece of the puzzle, it was a francolin busy murdering a dung pile and, taking pleasure in doing that. I'm sure it was quite exciting to see. It's quite interesting. This is an apple leaf tree. I'm going to try and break off a piece of that wood, actually. For those of you keeping the tree lists, as Brent has been suggesting, Phalaenoptera violensia is the genus and species of this tree. Why I want to go fetch a piece of it for you is because it is a tree that they make wooden spoons from, the local people. This is what the wood looks like, a beautiful yellowy color, and doesn't splinter, which is why they make wooden utensils from it. Now, the best way to show you what the wood looks like is to shave it. You'll see that it works relatively easily. And spoons are made with this. Wooden spoons, forks, knives, anything that requires a wood that doesn't splinter. You do what I'm doing there with my fingers, you do that with a piece of leadwood, or you do that with a piece of matumi, and your finger's going to know about it. This, very smooth, as you can see, even my thumb is polishing it up quite nicely. Have a look at that. Beautiful color on that. And if I take it up to my mouth, not snagging at all. So yeah, works. So apple leaf, or in Afrikaans they call it a rasblaar, or its genus and species is Phalaenoptera violensia, named after the very violet flowers that it gets on its on the tree during the early part of the season, during the end of spring. Anyway, constantly amazes me. I think it was a day or two ago we were talking about where the local African people choose to build their homes, and a lot of what we're looking at is learnt from the local Shangaan people. And I just keep on coming back to the fact that how many thousands of years of trial and error went by before, you know, they figured out that the leadwood was good to make poles from because the termites didn't eat it, and the apple leaf was good to make spoons from because it doesn't splinter, and you know, the tamboti leaf juice is good to cure worm infections in the eyes of cattle, or to do a root canal if need be. Just really fascinating. Mountainous mitre drains. These hills that we're going over are not speed bumps. What they actually are is where water goes down the hill. The faster water goes, the larger the sand particle that it can transport, and therefore the covering or the cap that they've got on the roads gets washed away if you don't put in something to stop the water from picking up speed. And this mitre drain, there we go, over there and there, and there's another one in front of us there. That mitre drain there is to stop the water. And from me talking about water and mitre drains, imaginary water and mitre drains, Jamie is approaching a waterhole to see what's there. I think it'd be a good idea for you to go through and join her with that. Look at
back, guys, and as you can see, we've got some, hello big girl, it's all right, it's okay, we've got some ellies moving through, and this is one of the females with the shortened trunks, and then we've got a couple of little youngsters coming through as well. Looks like two young boys and this big female. Quickly, little one, you're being left behind. And I cannot think of a better way to spend a late afternoon. Hello. And I think they are not going to stop here at Twin Dams. They might well be on their way up to Djuma Dam, so you could well be seeing some ellies on the camera sometime soon. I just wanted to get you across quickly as they passed in front of us, because they are very much on a mission. Loop around, see if we can get one more visual of this tiny herd. Could well have been part of the bigger herd that we saw a little bit earlier. We're not far away at all. We're a couple of 100 meters away from where we saw those ellies earlier. So we're going to go see if we can get one last visual of them before I move across to Gowrie, Maine, and have a listen for those lions. Definitely seen at least this female before with her shorter trunk. Okay, big girl, I'm not gonna come any closer. I mentioned that I've seen this elephant before and I've spoken to her before. She does often come and just show herself with a nice display of ears open, just to remind us of how big she is. And Sibusiso was reminded of a story that his grandfather told him, that elephants could distinguish between individual people's voices, and they could work out if you are male or female and how old you are from the way that you sound. And that is absolutely true. I have no doubt that elephants distinguish between male and female. They are unbelievably intelligent animals, and they do respond to different pitches and tones. And when I do speak to the elephants, obviously I don't expect them to understand what I'm saying, but tone does play a very, very big role in how you're expressing yourself to them. And you can see how well adapted she is to using the trunk that is a little bit shorter than other elephants' trunks, and then taking direct bites off the tree. And that's her adaptation to working her way around that slight shortening of the trunk. Very cleverly adapted. She's just trying to break that branch with her tusk. There we go. It doesn't seem to be hampering her at all in terms of her feeding. But yes, I believe that elephants recognize at least male and female. They would certainly be able to distinguish between a child's voice and an adult's voice, both in terms of the sound and in terms of the way that people look. And that is true of quite a few animal species out here. They do distinguish between children and adults. And watching a pride of lions respond to a crying child on the back of a vehicle, they do focus very intently on that child, just in response to tone. And I also personally believe that if you have, probably not in this kind of situation where these elephants move through a big area and they encounter lots of different people, but I do believe that elephants can get to know certain people's voices. I also think that they know the different types of vehicle sounds, and they know which vehicles they are more comfortable with than others. I've seen first-hand evidence of that, with elephants responding differently to Land Cruiser engines and then Land Rover engines. And that very much depends on what they've learnt in terms of how people have behaved around them. And it's phenomenal to watch how dexterous that trunk of hers is, even lacking the finer lips right at the end. She's currently feeding on a sickle bush, which is also incredible to watch. And sickle bush, as many people will know, have the most brutal spines on them. Driving over sickle bushes is a recipe for a flat tire. Just having a look, I might have got that tree wrong now that I'm looking at it clearly. I think it's actually one of the acacias, which is still got some fairly savage looking thorns. There you can see her taking direct bites and using her mouth to pull the last bits of that branch off. And that is very, very unusual to see in elephants, with them taking direct bites from trees. And that will be her way of adapting to that shortened trunk. And there's a lot of liquid on the side of her face there, and that means that she's been secreting from her temporal gland. Now it's something that males must, so that heightened testosterone state that they sometimes go into. They do that, they secrete regularly from their temporal glands, but females will also do it. And it's quite a good mood indicator. And it doesn't necessarily mean stress, it could mean any kind of emotional response to a situation. Because I've seen perfectly relaxed elephants, as she is now, with those temporal gland secretions. It might have been excitement, might have been happiness. They've got such a wide range of emotions that they do experience. Decided she didn't want that last bit. And she is very definitely a special character who has learned very well to get around her slight physical disability. And you can see how resiliently that the tree bark is, and she's pulled it away directly with her mouth. And there is nothing I love more than sitting with a herd of elephants. And Natasha and Regina, you say that there's something about elephants that lowers the blood pressure and just makes you feel that much more relaxed. And I couldn't agree with you more. Sometimes in my worst moods, I will go out and find an elephant herd and sit with them for as long as possible. And it doesn't matter what I'm worried about or what I'm feeling at the time. Regardless, they just have a way of completely calming you down. And I think it is just sitting in that amazingly intelligent and yet almost uncomplicated being that is next to you. It's hard for me to describe exactly what I mean by that, but I'm sure many of you do understand. there is something otherworldly about the presence of elephants, because you know that they are as intelligent as the most intelligent animals out there, and probably have things better figured out than we do as a species. I'm going to shift forward just fractionally so we can have a look at her. I don't think she's going to move any closer to that tree. And I certainly cannot think of a better way to spend the last few moments of the evening than in the presence of such a fantastic animal. Here she goes, tackling that last bit with considerable determination. And she's learned to use that trunk to just push things straight into her mouth. And I must say, having encountered this particular individual a couple of times now, I do really have a soft spot for her. In the way that her life's just a little bit harder in terms of feeding. You can see her really determinedly trying to get that branch. She really wants it. And she's still in perfect physical condition. She looks like a very healthy elephant. We can see her now using her mouth directly to try and bite that last remaining bark off. And she's definitely using her mouth more often than any other elephant would. And Karen was wondering, because elephants only have 6 sets of teeth throughout their life, would this mean that she has a slightly shorter lifespan? Would she wear down her teeth quicker than other elephants? And I don't think so. I don't think it's going to have any massive impact on her life expectancy, because the motion that she's doing is generally not too different to just the usual chewing that elephants do. There might be a little bit more pulling, and a lot of use of her tusks, but I don't think that it's going to cause a significantly more amount or a significantly greater amount of wear and tear on her teeth. There's something phenomenally touching about her determination to consume this tree. And just as she disappears off into the block and into the sunset, we're going to quickly cut across to Stef so that he can bid you all a good evening and a good night, and then we will be back here just a little bit later.
I had to steal you from your elephant to say goodbye. Myself and Bryan have had a wonderful afternoon. We haven't had too much luck in terms of anything, but that's not unusual at the moment. I still haven't managed to break my drought cycle of animals here, but luckily Jamie is on form and has a constant flow of things coming your way. I just wanted to say thank you very much for all your questions coming through. There's just one question that I wanted to ask was Donna in Sudbury wanted to know if the wood that we made that spoon from could be made into baskets. Not baskets so much as bowls. Definitely bowls, not baskets. But for everything else, from an implement point of view, you can make it. But on that note, I want to say goodbye. We will see you again for the sunrise safari tomorrow morning, bright and early. And I'll bid you good night and a good day.
Back, and as you can see, we've just repositioned slightly so that we can spend the last few moments of the sunset safari with this wonderful elephant character. And she provides a very, very important lesson into the resilience of these incredible animals. Slightly shorter trunk, she'll probably always need to spend just that little bit more time feeding and focusing on one plant. She just lacks a little bit of dexterity in terms of her meals. And that is, she's very, very fortunate that she lives in the herd situation that elephants do live in, where those bonds between individuals are so incredibly tight.
You can see the trunk dripping.
Yeah, her trunk is dripping. Might be filled with mucus just as a way of protecting that sensitive inside layer, especially because it is a little bit shortened. So the sensitive passage inside might be a little bit exposed. She might also have stopped for a drink at some point and it's still a little bit moist in her trunk. She would still be able to use that trunk perfectly well for drinking. But a really, really wonderful character and a special time that we get to share with her. She will be protected by her herd for the rest of her life, and she will stay with them and be well looked after. And as we sit right in the southern section of Djuma, listening very, very carefully for the sounds of the lions, it's all very quiet and very, very peaceful. We get to enjoy the last few rays of the sunset and listen to the very peaceful sounds of this amazing animal feeding. I must say that I feel very personally touched just spending the time that we have here with this ellie. I think that she will always hold quite a special place for me, and I hope that we get to see her regularly in the future. And as the final moments of the Sunset Safari draw to a close, I thank you all for joining us. I've had an absolutely wonderful afternoon, so thank you all for being a part of that. It's always nice to get to explore and just to enjoy the little things around us. And we will be listening out tonight for any action that's happening between these two big male coalitions of lions that are just south of our boundary, and we'll be sure to keep you updated. And a big thank you to Andrew for all of his hard work, and to Tara and Jess in FC and Eugene for all of his technical genius, and thank you to you, the viewers, for joining us on a very, very special Sunset Safari. Have a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and we will see you tomorrow for the Sunrise Safari.